We'll get started shortly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and get us started today. I am Natalie Copiel, founder and CEO of Walker's Legacy. Walker's Legacy is proud to present CARES Act one-on-one, getting to the funding and informational conversation on the CARES Act, which is Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and finding funding opportunities for your business. Our goal is to ensure our Walker's Legacy community is informed on the latest funding opportunities for businesses. Named in honor of Madam C.J. Walker, Walker's Legacy was created with a mission to cultivate an ecosystem of access designed to inspire, equip, and engage a global network of professional and entrepreneurial women of color. You can learn more about Walker's Legacy by joining us online at www.walkerslegacy.com. Super excited to have us joined by our first guest, Henry Childs, who was appointed as the 17th National Director of the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency. Welcome, Henry. How are you today?
Awesome, how are you?
Great. Our second guest is Stephanie DeVane, Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Business Development for the National Urban League. Stephanie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Natalie. Good morning to everyone.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we have Nina Roque, Executive Director for the National Women's Business Council and Designated Federal Officer. Nina, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. So let's kind of get into, some of what today's purpose is all about. But first, I want to give Henry an opportunity to kind of talk about what the Minority Business Development Agency is doing and has done as it relates to supporting women of color entrepreneurs before COVID and some things that are happening now as a result of the COVID CARES Act.
Yeah, so first of all, Natalie, thank you for having me on your show. The lighting is not magnificent today, but it's okay. I'm going to make it do. So, first off, I wanted to just set the landscape. We know that our minority businesses have been particularly affected by the coronavirus. We know that. And everybody has their place in the ecosystem. My role, you know me, I'm always about access, right? Some people talk about awareness, and it's good to have town halls so people are aware of all the funding opportunity. That's great. But to me, I'm always trying to get people actually access to the funding. And in our case, MBDA tell you how to get some of the money that we have. So I'm going to start off by just talking about some of the current grant. So I'm going to separate it to the current grants and then some of the CARES Act funding. With the current grants, I'm excited to let you know that right now, for the first time ever, MBDA has women of color grant funding opportunities. So we're doing 3 grants, and you can go on our website, www.mbda.gov. There's going to be $1.4 million available this year and $1.4 million available next year. And these are full-blown business centers, but they're only for women entrepreneurs. So a total of $2.8 million is out right now. You can get those. And I think that's very exciting. It's the first time MBDA has ever done that. I'm pretty sure people listening now are interested in that. So that's good. That's number one. Number two, we have also available right now 2 inner city innovation grants. What we found is that over 70% of minorities in the United States live in what we call inner cities or large metropolitan areas. So we decided that we need to fund these areas. So there's going to be 2 grants, total of $1.4 million for these innovation grants also. So when you add them up, you have the Women of Color funding, you have the inner city innovation funding. You're looking at this year about $3 million. And next year, again, it'll be $3 million. So we're really excited about that. And you can apply for that. The CARES Act funding is a little bit differently. This is guided by Congress. We have $10 million that we're going to spend. About 70% of that is going to go to our existing business centers, but 30% we've designated for what we call some of our minority chambers, because we know that these are the people who work with the mom and pops, right? The sole proprietorships, the people with very few employees that MBDA normally doesn't reach into. We're going to work with the chambers to reach into that. So that's number two. That's the 10 million. The third also is the big pot of money, which is the PPP and the EIDL loans. I had a great call with SBA Administrator Jovita yesterday because we're really trying to figure out what I'm hearing through my network is, Henry, there's two problems. Number one, the big banks are, as you can exist, they're serving existing clients first and some of the high value clients first. The community banks who do serve minority businesses don't have the capacity to take on a huge volume that they're seeing of people trying to get, loan applications. So I talked to Jovita yesterday, and we're going to work with, it's going to be SBA, MBDA, and Treasury, work together on how do we get minority businesses access to this PPP funding, these $380 billion. So that's something I'm working very, very hard on. And we're going to get it right because we know that most of our businesses can't wait 30 or 60 days, to get this money. They need money now. People are making decisions now. Do I have to hire? Do I have to fire? Do I have to close down shop? So time is of the essence, and it's my job to get people this money.
So this is great, Henry. Let me just recap. So first off, Henry talked about the $1.5 million that exists for the Women of Color Initiative, designed to support organizations that are working with the fastest growing entrepreneurial segment in the country. He also talked about the $10 million that was part of the CARES 101 Act that came out to support MBDA and its business centers, as well as getting money out to chambers of commerce. And then lastly, Henry, what I'm hearing is that you all are working on innovative ways to be able to get funding directly to minority businesses who may be bottlenecked with some of the larger banking corporations, who also have kind of, in some instances, put rules and regulations around how they're dispersing, at least accepting some of the applications, and then the disbursement comes through the SBA. You want to reduce the barriers to opportunities for loans. We all know on this call that access to capital has historically remained an issue for minority-owned businesses. And so working with some traditional, maybe non-traditional institutions to help get funds where they're needed most and in a timely fashion. So that's fantastic. And very happy to hear that. I just want to say, this is now your 51st year in operation as an MBDA. So last year, MBDA celebrated its 50 years anniversary. MBDA is the only organization and entity and agency within the Department of Commerce that is singularly focused on supporting minority businesses. So it is important that, one, we support them, that we show up, we engage, that we submit applications for some of these grant funds, that we provide them with our feedback. And Henry, I know that you all have been kind of doing things over the course of the last year to champion all of the initiatives that you just mentioned. One that I didn't mention that you said, and I'm doing a kind of recap, is the is it 1.1 or 1.5 for innovation in urban communities?
1.4, so it'll be 2.8 total, 1.4 this year, 1.4 next year for inner city innovation. Yep, brand new grant.
Okay, so that's a brand new grant for inner city innovation that is focused on working. And the inner cities are really where we're seeing a lot of COVID cases coming and COVID happening, and it is dissipating Main Street. So what can we do with this innovation grant that MBDA is putting out to try to help create opportunities for minority businesses to innovate and stay afloat during this time? Henry, I want to make sure that if there's a question I didn't ask you, because I think you have to kind of depart us earlier today. If not, stay on with us. But I want to make sure if there's anything that I didn't get to as it relates to what MBDA has done or is doing. And why I'm emphasizing the has done is because I want to make sure that people know that MBDA isn't just kind of showing up here in the wake of COVID and doing something at this moment. These are things that you have been working on, the agency has been working on, the department has been working on for the last few years as it relates to truly innovating how and who you touch as an agency. So I just want to make sure I give you the last opportunity if there's anything that we've missed.
Nope, and I just want to reiterate that this is really a test on ecosystem building, and everybody has a role to play, but MBDA's role in my mind is access to this funding, because the last thing I want to do is point people to opportunities and they get there and they meet barrier after barrier after barrier. At some point, somebody has to help them get access to this funding. And that's what we're doing, whether it be with, the CDFI's treasury, whether it be with SBA. I'm literally like, this is all I work on full time, don't sleep, to give minority businesses the capital and the liquidity they need to survive. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Henry. Thank you so much for joining us. Absolutely. Again, that's Henry Childs, Director of the Minority Business Development Agency from the U.S. Department of Commerce. We're going to move on now to some questions for both you, Stephanie, as well as Nina. Stephanie, I'd love if you could, and again, just to give background, Stephanie runs the entrepreneurship programs for the National Urban League based out of New York City, with chapters all across the country, and in some instances with chapters in other parts of the world. So Stephanie, can you talk to us a little bit about some specific resources that the National Urban League has in place to assist minority businesses and other entities?
Sure. So good morning, Natalie, and everyone on the call. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this conversation, which I think is very important. And I just pray that everyone and their families are well during this crisis. So the National Urban League's Entrepreneurship Center program has been around for over 15 years, and we provide management, counseling, training, mentoring services for entrepreneurs that are looking to start, grow, or scale their businesses. Our services are wide and varied. They include comprehensive business planning and support, financial and credit education, access to capital, business-to-business networking, contracting and procurement opportunities, and certification. And we really believe that developing these skills will allow entrepreneurs to improve their operations, increase their capacity, obtain financing and contracts, and better serve their customers. And our ultimate goal at the National Urban League is to create jobs in underserved communities that lead to sustainable businesses, and more importantly, generate wealth for those business owners and their families and communities. And so our centers serve anyone that walks through the doors. We do work a lot with WBEs and MBEs, and we have 2 women's business resource centers in Louisiana and in Cincinnati, Ohio, that specifically serve women business owners in a variety of ways. And I just want to give a couple of examples of the work that we're doing in those 2 particular affiliates. So the Urban League of Louisiana's Women's Business Resource Center is a part of the Small Business Administration, the Office of Women's Business Ownership and Office of Entrepreneurial Development. It's part of the network of women business centers. They're also a member of the Association of Women's Business Centers. This affiliate established its WBRC in 2001, and they did that to support both MBEs and WBEs as a pathway for them to secure economic parity. They provide small business development services. That includes business education workshops, interactive training, hands-on technical assistance, access to resources that are relevant to both aspiring and existing entrepreneurs in southeastern Louisiana. So they do a variety of things: comprehensive business planning and support, loan packaging, business certifications, assistance with operational streamlining, and also business financials and accounting. The Contractor Resource Center is an extension of that WBRC, and it was established in 2014 as an expansion to provide resources to WBEs and other small business owners who needed access to state-of-the-art plotters and computer training, where they could actually obtain resources for contracting, specifically for project management, construction, and all of those types of fields. In our Ohio affiliate, in our Urban League of Southwestern Ohio, which is based in Cincinnati, we operate a couple of different programs. One is the African American Business Development Program, also the Ohio Small Business Development Center, which of course is in partnership with the SBA, and also the Women's Business Enterprise Council of Ohio River Valley. That is a regional partner organization for WeBank, which many of you I'm sure know is the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, and they are the largest certifier of women-owned businesses in the country. Now, the foundation of that particular center in Cincinnati, their mission is to certify women-owned businesses, but we also do a lot of other things that are helpful. We provide development opportunities to scale businesses so that they can compete in the marketplace. We provide connections with corporations through their supplier diversity organizations. And we also provide time for networking opportunities with other WBEs and with our partner corporate organizations. Now, many of you probably know that the certification that I mentioned is accepted by over, thousands and thousands of corporations across the country, and a number of federal government agencies. And as many of you can probably attest, it's an important marketing tool for you to expand your business's visibility for decision makers in the corporate procurement area. Lastly, that center also hosts forum luncheons, which provide opportunities for the WBEs and corporate partners to network. And then they operate the Ohio River Valley Business Development Program, which is important. It's an offshoot of the African American Business Development Program that I mentioned earlier. It's a comprehensive 6-month business development program specifically for women business owners who are trying to build sustainable and scalable companies. And those are just two of the examples of some of the critical resources that the Urban League Entrepreneurship Program is providing to WBEs.
Perfect. I'm happy to hear that. I want to, so just kind of in summating, the National Urban League has been around for more than 100 and maybe 25 years.
Yeah, we were established in 1910.
Okay.
Wow.
And so they are a valuable resource. I think people know them in many different capacities. And so Stephanie's work is to ensure that you know them in the capacity of being there to support entrepreneurship and business growth amongst businesses, regardless of race or ethnicity. But obviously the National Urban League's mission has really been focused on working with communities of color to ensure that we're reducing the economic disparity and increasing economic prosperity. And so with that being said, many of the National Urban League centers have entrepreneurship centers. And so to Stephanie's point, we encourage you to check them out online, call your local Urban League, ask them about entrepreneurial programming that they have. From what we're hearing, Stephanie, it could range from programming for a day to programming for multiple months.
Correct.
And it's programming also to support women in business as well as people in communities of color. So with that being said, and as we kind of dovetail into the women in business piece, I'm going to kind of just share a little bit about what Walker's Legacy has and is doing. Walker's Legacy has been around for the last 10 years working to empower multicultural women in business. And we do this through entrepreneurship training, workshops, seminars, and accelerator programs. We currently have accelerator programs running in 5 cities across the country right now. They are 9-week entrepreneurship accelerator programs designed to take you from A to Z with your small business. And we are also going to be scaling that out to an online platform very shortly, soon to come. So we will make sure that those of you who are joined on the line will receive information about that and all of the resources that we're talking about here today. But I highly encourage you to consider Walker's Legacy as your 365 repository for information as it relates specifically and exclusively to the role that women of color play, to success profiles, to entrepreneurship programs, to support their growth. While we don't do certification, and I think Stephanie mentioned some great resources that the Urban League does, we do serve as a great dovetail to existing programs and established organizations like the Urban League, like the Minority Business Development Agency, and like the National Women's Business Council, Enter in Nina Roque. And so Nina, making that smooth transition.
Yes, of course.
As we're talking about, we've heard from Henry what the administration is doing from perspective, and his agency, the Minority Business Development Agency, what they have coming up. We have also heard from the Urban League what they are doing to support minority and women business owners. And I'd love to hear kind of what in the National Women's Business Council's role is and what response you all have had through the SBA and through with your council to support women in business during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for the invitation. Great to hear from Henry and Stephanie on what they're doing. A lot of synergy and collaboration as well. So for those of you on the call that are not familiar, the National Women's Business Council is an independent federal advisory committee. We were established in 1988 to provide advice and policy recommendations to the President, Congress, and the SBA. So the actual council is comprised of women small business owners and representatives of national women's business organizations, representing vastly diverse voices and industries. Some of them were actually mentioned on this call. Stephanie WeBank sits on our council. The Association for Women's Business Centers similarly sit on our council. So we're very excited to have this diverse group of women business owners and entrepreneurs that really provide us with the expertise and
Nina,
let us know. And let us know. They've really been letting us know what's been going on in the ecosystem as it relates to COVID-19. And we really want to make sure as the council that we are doing two things throughout this pandemic. Number one, that we're connecting, right? That we're making sure that women entrepreneurs know about the resources that are available, know how to access the relief, know how to find a local lender, and making sure that we're connecting those business owners to those like Stephanie, like you, Natalie, making sure that we're making that connection so that they know how they can access the relief, how they can find aid in applying. So that's one piece, right? Really making sure that we're connecting. The second piece is to making sure that us as the council, that we remain committed, to advocating for women business owners and entrepreneurs, the current 13 million women business owners and entrepreneurs. So we want to do that by hearing from you and by making sure that we're keeping updated with what's going on. How are you accessing that relief? Are you having issues accessing funding? What difficulties have you had? What opportunities have you had during this time as well? So what are the policies? What are the policies that we need to be reviewing as a council, as an advisory council, so that we can better advocate for you? Not just when the economy is booming, but also in times like during this pandemic, right? Making sure that women entrepreneurs and business owners have those tools and resources, that we've reviewed the policies, and that we can better be a mouthpiece and an advocate for women business owners in Congress, and the administration, and at the Small Business Administration as well.
Perfect.
So with that, Natalie, if I could just add, I'm going to give you an email and I'll make sure to send this to you as well. But we want to hear from you. If you can email us at info@nwbc.gov. We'd love to hear how the coronavirus is impacting your business.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Nina, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that your camera isn't working, but it's good to hear your voice. Absolutely. So the National Women's Business Council is a diverse representation of advisors to the president on topics of importance to women entrepreneurs. And so Nina is the executive director of that effort through the Small Business Administration. You've just heard from her some of the things that they are doing and have done. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that Walker's Legacy has had a partnership with the National Women's Business Council in the past, producing the first ever research report on Black female entrepreneurship, which was released probably about 3 years ago, and subsequently led to other very important research studies that were done looking at different ethnic subsets of women entrepreneurs. Again, the fastest growing entrepreneurial demographic. And the National Women's Business Council has been a repository for data and information as it relates to women in business. And so I highly encourage you to visit their website, which is National Women's Business Council, nwbc.gov, correct?
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
I want to make sure I get that right. And as I mentioned, we'll conclude this call today by providing links, resources, and bio information, which you all have also gotten. We're thankful that you joined us. I do want to take a couple of moments, and I'm going to ask on my team if it's possible to screen share some of the infographics that we have. If not, it's okay. You can ping me in the chat box. But if it's possible, I'd like to be able to screen share some of the infographics that we have created on behalf of Walker's Legacy for the CARES Act specifically. So as it relates to the CARES Act, we have released a CARES Act 101 guide. And in the guide, we talk about resources that exist for families, for individuals, and for small businesses. And I think one of the things that's very important as we're talking about this is really what the definition of small business is as it relates to some of the opportunities that have come down the pike. So what we're seeing now is, for the first time, unemployment is something that is permissible to, if you were an independent contractor, if you were a gig worker, if you were someone who kind of was a solopreneur. Unemployment has opened itself up to be available to you, and we encourage you to consider that. There's also additional stipends for unemployment that have been made. We know that right now, as of today, the Washington Post has released that 80 million Americans are receiving their stimulus checks direct into their bank accounts. If you have not done your taxes, please know that the taxes are now not due until July 15th. No longer are they due today, April 15th. That has been delayed. But we encourage you to get your taxes done. If they're not done for last year, we encourage you to do that so that you have an opportunity to get your stimulus check, to go visit the irs.gov to get information about how you can submit your stimulus check request, regardless of whether you've actually filed your taxes for 18 and 19. So that's also very important. Who is permitted as it relates to how open the unemployment opportunity is at this stage. And then also the ways in which you will go about receiving those funds. And again, 80 million Americans are projected to be receiving their funds this week. So that is important. Other things that we talked about are expanded medical family leave and allowing employers, if you are an employer, employing company, knowing that employers can provide expanded and extended time to care for someone who is dealing with a COVID or coronavirus currently. And then that is something that is available. Emergency paid sick leave. If you are an employee, you now have access to more emergency paid sick leave if you are dealing with the coronavirus or COVID. Again, this is all in the Walker's Legacy COVID resource guidebook that we have made available on our website, and then we will also share at the end. If you are on any form of public assistance as it relates to food, and I just want to take a moment here because I mention this a lot. Sometimes when you go to the grocery store, you see a little thing that says WIC. And it says WIC because the people who are allowed to buy that are are recipients of public assistance, and that is the only item that they may be able to buy. And so I'd like to challenge all of us as we're going through and just throwing everything in our buckets and baskets, getting 15 and 20 of everything, that if it does not say, if it doesn't say WIC, choose that. If it does say WIC, just know that if you have hoarded that, if you have taken that, if that's gone, that person no longer has the opportunity to shop for something using their benefits. And so we are all our brother and sister's keeper, and we are all responsible for being a part of the community effort that's going to keep us afloat. And so small details like that are important. And so while we're talking about one set of paper towels, and I don't know how toilet paper became the hottest thing since sliced bread, but it has. We've reached that day, y'all. Okay. But as you're doing that, just know the same type of respect you would have for that toilet paper, okay, and only grabbing one because they've required that, you should also have that same type of respect and consideration for things that say WIC only, because that is a serious moment between a family eating and a family not eating that night, that week, or possibly even that month. Okay, so just want to make a note of that. And so there's an extension, $400 million to assist local food banks to support folks during this time. The paid sick leave is up to 80 hours of paid leave. Okay, and then also as it relates to small businesses, the Paycheck Protection Program, we've got $389 billion worth of funds available. You just heard from Henry that they're trying to find ways to get that money out faster, sooner, and to the folks that need it the most, but you've got to have your paperwork together. And another component of this too is who is permitted to submit. And so with that, you are seeing that people who are sole proprietors, people who are contractors, people who are gig workers are also able to submit against wages that are lost or wages that were forecasted and that have now been lost, right? So it's not just about, in some instances, like what some of these loan programs you're able to say, or in unemployment as a result of COVID, this event has been canceled and it was happening next month, and that was a paycheck that I was expecting. And that's something that you can put when you put forward your unemployment. So just know it's about where you've been and also where you were about to go, but you also have to have some documentation to show that that was the case, right? So don't just say you were about to go work for company X, Y, and Z, and then you don't have an offer letter. This is a true statement of we're seeing offers being rescinded, we're seeing cancellations across the country, and they're having an impact on people in the forecasted future, and that's also being taken into consideration. Lastly, we have SBA debt relief program. The SBA will pay the principal and interest of current 7A loans and new 7A loans issued prior to September 27, 2020. Again, this is not free money, but debt-free money, which is the cheapest form of money that you can borrow. And so it's important to, again, know what kind of loan you have. If you already have a 7A loan, know that this now, it can be converted to a debt-free loan, okay? If you started on September 27, 2020, know that you now can have an immediate debt-free loan. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, up to $2 million in working capital loans for small businesses. This is also important because, again, if you have a shop, a storefront, something, it is important that you know about different loan programs. If you are closed for business operation, this is not just about a tsunami that hits your store and puts you out of business. The tsunami is COVID, and it's affecting us all. And so you have an opportunity to plead your case for the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And then lastly, the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriation Act provides $8.3 billion in emergency funding from federal agencies. And there are discussions and talks about additional forms of stimulus that may be coming down the pike. Now, I see a comment here from Tommy Marks. Thank you, Tommy. Please know that to check the filing deadline for your state taxes is not the same as the federal deadline. Virginia only has an extended without penalty due to June. Thank you for that, Tommy. We appreciate that because to that point about the federal taxes being due now on July 15th, some of the states do not have the same deadline. So it's up to us to be informed and to know what the requirements are based on the states and the locales in which we are located. The last thing I'm going to say is that was just the federal funding. What we at Walker's Legacy have also done, we released it today right before this call, is our $1 million private funding guide. Now, this does not go into the multiple trillion-dollar funding that's available from the federal government. This is companies, corporations, nonprofits, and in some instances, some municipalities that have stepped up to the charge and are offering funds, grants, loans for small businesses and for individuals. And that's now in the resource guide that we have put together, which is the $1 million private funding guide. Those are two separate guides, both available on Walker's Legacy's website, walkerslegacy.com. We will make those available at the conclusion of today's program. But in there, you'll see grants from Facebook, grants from Google, who has now released about $100 million in funds. You'll see information about food supplemental programs that are being provided by private nonprofit organizations. We encourage you to share that information, and we encourage you to share it widely. I challenge and ask our partners on the call today if you would please share these guides with your constituents and your networks. We've worked tirelessly on putting them together, as well as the infographics that I did mention. I'm going to stop there and see if we have any questions from anyone in the audience before we conclude today's call. If you have a question, feel free to type it. I'll give them just a moment. And as we give them a moment to collect their thoughts and see if they have any questions, I will also just open it back up to our panelists to see, is there anything else that you all want folks to know about during this time?
So I would, Natalie, thank you again for all of that information. I would like them to know about two things. The first thing is next Wednesday, the 22nd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we are hosting a webinar with one of our council members, the Veneta Project, where we're breaking down the available federal relief for venture-backed startups. Venture-backed startups. So this is a very specific segment We really on the council are focusing, making sure that women entrepreneurs know about VC and are ready for VC. So we want to make sure that those that have acquired that VC backing know how to access that available federal relief. The second is, and I know Stephanie alluded to this, but I want to make it very clear that the CARES Act provided $265 million to provide COVID counseling and training through the Women's Business Center program. So there's over 100 women business centers across the country that offer that one-on-one training and the technical assistance and mentorship that entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs specifically, may need to access this federal relief and even some of that state relief. So make sure that you know where there's a WBC available, where the nearest WBC is to you, and I can provide you with that link so you can share with everyone that's been on the call where those WBCs are located.
Okay, great. That sounds excellent.
This is Stephanie, and just to add really quickly from National Urban League, a couple of things as well. One, the Urban League Fights for You, Fighting for Fairness and Equity in the Face of the Coronavirus Crisis, is our online social media campaign to disseminate information to the public, to educate them on the most up-to-date and accurate data, and I stress accurate data because there's a lot of myths out there on coronavirus and how it's impacting communities of color. In addition to that, I want you to know that as our Urban League of Louisiana says, we don't pause, we pivot. So across the country through our centers and all the affiliates that support entrepreneurs, including WBEs, we continue to serve our clients in the safest way possible. We are conducting online webinars and trainings. Feel free to visit the nul.org website to link to the Entrepreneurship Center program, or you can contact me. I can get you information. We are continuing to do business, and we are assisting our clients with everything from filling out applications for loans to weekly seminars and guides that we're also providing on how to survive during the crisis. So thank you again, Natalie, for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So what I'm doing in this corner box is linking to those two guides that I mentioned. If our panelists want to link anything on the side too, again, we'll take this, compile it, and send it out to everybody at the end. I do see a couple of questions here. Does anybody know when the CARES payroll protection forgiveness period would start? What is the origination date? Barbara Ortiz, thank you for that question. I will answer that as best I understand. A loan origination starts the date that the loan starts. So until you've received an approval from your bank, until the funds have hit your account, that's the date of the loan origination. And so from there, then it would go to the 18 months that is required of the Payroll Protection Act. And I think there's a 6-month check-in point for you to kind of demonstrate that you've either retained and or hired folks as a result of the funding, 30% of which you can use for things like rent and other overhead expenses associated with the operations of your company. But any loan originates and starts itself at the moment that it's actually materialized and it's been fermented as a loan. It doesn't start at the point of the loan funding being available or of the loan application. Okay? Anybody have anything that they want to add to that? Okay. I have a question here from Alma Davis. If someone is a 1099 contractor and they're receiving pay from one contracted company but not others that they would have received, are they able to apply for unemployment for the lost wages from those companies? A company was contracted to pay a contractor $10,000 but can now only pay $5,000. Can you claim unemployment for the difference you should have been receiving? So that's tricky. I'm going to go out on a limb and answer this here. Again, I'm not the unemployment insurance expert, but I would say no. Because this still seems like you're doing business, right? So if you had lost all wages and it had lost all garnishments and were demonstrating that you were basically unemployed and were not generating any revenue, that's kind of part of the unemployment piece. Like you can't, even if you were kind of going from being a white collar, like SVP, and then you started working in another role, you're still working, right? And so unemployment doesn't kick in just because there's a gap or a chasm between where you were and where you aren't. It kicks in because there's nothing there, right? So there's no floor for you. So in this instance, this is just kind of a moment of some lost wages for the company. However, the other programs that we talked about, the other programs that we mentioned, you may be able to do something around the economic disaster relief loan program that starts at the $10,000 mark and goes up to $2 million. You may be able to plead a case in those instances, but you won't be able to get unemployment from my perspective. Again, and I encourage you to go talk to an unemployment officer. I would not see why unemployment would be implemented during that time. Okay. Anybody have anything else that they want to say there? Okay. We have a question from an unknown requester. Hello, I haven't seen a lot of grants or loans for businesses that are home-based. Do you have insights to that information? Thank you so much. So I'm just going to say, I don't think it matters where you're based. I think what they're looking at is whether or not your business has been impacted. And so we're seeing this across the board, right? So it's not just about, you ran an animal pet store on Main Street and now you can't open anymore. It's also about maybe you were doing something else and you were doing it from your home, doing something in service, and now all your clients have gone out of business. It's a ricochet, right? And so it doesn't matter where you're physically located, whether you're working out of your home, a co-working space, you have a huge building on Park Avenue. It's really about, has there been a dissipation in business or a dissipation in employment for you that has floored you in some regards? And that is what would make it permissible for you to go after. Now, with a home-based business, please know that you can still talk about sections of your house for which you're doing business. So even when you file your taxes against your person, you can allocate particular square footage in your home that you are using for business purposes. And so if you want to say that particular square footage, let's say 10% of a 1,000 square foot apartment that is going for $1,000 a month, that would be $100 a month that you would essentially be saying is what you're paying in office space for your business operations. And that would be something that you would then be able to roll up into the PPP or use the PPP funding for, but you've got to be able to justify how that's happening. Make sense?
Natalie, if I can just add, you're absolutely correct as it relates to the home-based business. If you take a look at the Small Business Committee, the Senate Small Businesses Committee guide, all small business concerns that have fewer than 500 employees or meet the applicable size standard at SBA are eligible for funding under the CARES Act. It does not matter if you are a home-based business, if you have no employees, that does not matter. And this is really important for women entrepreneurs specifically because we know that 90% of women business owners have no employees. So absolutely eligible if you're a solopreneur or if you have a home-based business.
Perfect. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. And then we have one last question here. I just started an event design business last March, and now all my events have been postponed or canceled, which leaves me with no income. Do I qualify for any assistance? I have not filed a tax return for the business yet. The short answer is yes, you do. If you are not deriving any revenues now, if you had contracts that have now kind of fallen to the wayside or have been delayed, you should, depending upon how you're running your business, you should either look into unemployment if it's completely gone dry, or you should look into one of the disaster loans or some other form of a program. Again, in the government resource guide that we have put together at walkerslegacy.com, or in the private resource guide, which we have put together at walkerslegacy.com, which we have also posted on the side here in the chat box. And so we will send that information out at the end of the program. But yes, you should apply. And I think, okay, last question here. I still work for a full-time job from home, and I'm also a self-employed independent contractor, which I'm not working anymore due to the virus pandemic. Would I qualify for lost wages? So I'm a self-employed independent contractor, which I'm not working for. So you still have a full-time job. If you still have a full-time job, no, you do not qualify for unemployment. Okay. You may be able to qualify for things under your business if you've, again, demonstrated you have the paperwork and filings. And that's why all this stuff is important, right? So disaster preparedness insurance, business interruption insurance, all these things that go into contracts, like a force majeure, which is basically an act of God. These are things that people need to be aware of before we have disaster circumstances, which is why I put a plug. Again, the programs that Walker's Legacy is doing to support entrepreneurship education for multicultural women, the programs that Stephanie is doing, the member networks that Nina has access to. It's easier to get ready, and it's easier to get ready when you've been ready. It's harder to get ready when you haven't been. Okay. And now what we're seeing is a flooding of the market, getting stuff together. And it's like, how do you know how to do this stuff and get this stuff together before a disaster strikes? Okay. So I'm going to close out our session here and just thank everybody again for joining us. Nina Roque with the National Women's Business Council and Stephanie DeVane from the National Urban League. We were also joined today by Director Henry Childs, who we are grateful for having joined us as well from the Minority Business Development Agency as part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. I will also let you know that we encourage you to join us this Sunday as we have a Ask a Boss session this Sunday featuring a former Secret Service leader and director who has now turned into a full-fledged entrepreneur running her own company, and she will be talking to us about pivoting during uncertain times. That will be on Sunday. Again, you can go to walkerslegacy.com. It's the Ask a Boss session. Join us again on Sunday at Zoom. And at Walker's Legacy, we look forward to bringing you insightful, meaningful programs and opportunities for conversation and community, similar to what you found today on this online program. Please stay connected to us for future events and programs. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.